Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Louise.
I feel so excited to see you, but really just sad because of the book
This
we're
book
reading.
is just really it's so heavy and depressing to just
It is
have it all out in front of us laid out.
sobering.
Okay, let's reintroduce the book with
American Baby, Gabrielle Glaser. We're on chapter 8. So if you're
Blue
reading
Ribbon Baby.
that says it all. Blue Ribbon Baby. Are you a blue ribbon baby, Sarah?
I think I fit the criteria of the 60s.
Yeah, me too.
At least,
there?
you know, on the outer the shell, as it were. Ugh.
Well, after reading this, you and I were just talking previously, because of what goes on here that we're about to discuss. I feel rather, blessed in my adoption, I guess would be the word, that I was with my biological mom for a little bit and the day went by and then not passed around too much. This gets pretty sick. I want to say some other things, but
I was not with my biological, not taken away, obviously a coerced adoption on the part of her adoptive mother.
Yeah.
Which also I kind of went down thinking had her mother been her biological mother, would she have insisted on giving me away? It did cross my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, I was, who knows how long I was in the hospital. Then I was in foster care, and my non-identifying information had some of the similar stuff that they just put on, like that stuff that just wasn't true about
made
up stuff. And then looking back, I remember on my non-identifying information, it says that my father was in pre-med. And I don't think that was ever the case. They met and they were just in Valparaiso. He was too young to have been, he wasn't pre-med, and then he went off to Vietnam.
Pre-med, so that, he couldn't have a baby at the time, but what a smart guy.
Right. Everything is like, and my birth mother,
you are very smart. So
they described her as pleasant,
she's pleasant
and pretty, and, just all this stuff. Anyway,
it's a seller's market. It says
here in that first chapter, nearly the agency said that Margaret was ambivalent about the adoption, but she felt she needed to continue her education. Nearly all of this was untrue. So everything that the evil Louise Wise agency put out there was just lies.
I know, I'm like mad at my own name for it. I'm like, ugh.
Well, and as we get further in the chapter, we find out that they were involved with the horrendous experimentation on separating triplets and twins, which was the subject of Three Identical Babies, one of the best documentaries on this subject
that everybody should watch if you haven't seen. That's another thing put on your list.
But they were just so involved in so many nefarious,
it's so bad
practices that it's just
and what's crazy sick. It's like Margaret and George wanted this baby and they didn't even have a home to give the baby to.
Right.
So
the baby could have been with two parents who loved him and wanted him, and instead he was passed around from
place to place. There was a section of that where she says he went to some parents that came to get him, and then he came back, and the mother did pamper him, the foster mother. Thank God for her in life.
I'm sure that their definition of that time of pamper is very different than mine. Yeah, it's probably she fed him and held him.
Held him, right? And she was sad to see him go. And then he was brought back because it just didn't work out, because he was 8 months old when they take him from his second caregiver to some cold family. They bring him back. It didn't work out, like a puppy at the pound.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just bring him back. It's not working out. And he was traumatized. And for a few days she put down. So it's like, God only knows what went on there.
There was, I think, I don't know if I've talked about this on our podcast, but I did a writing workshop years ago with this famous writer, and she was adopting two sisters from Ethiopia. They were like 6 and 8 or 5 and 7 or somewhere around there. And she posted all these pictures and with their first, like, I think they spent 8 months with her, and then she gave them back. And there was no guarantee that those two sisters would even stay together. And, but yes, the adoption didn't work out. And then suddenly it's been erased from social media. All those pictures are gone. It's very hard to find the story and what really went on.
These poor kids.
Yeah. But so giving,
oh my God. Well,
right at the very beginning, I really wanted to highlight this, is that among agencies nationwide, this strong arm strategy toward unmarried mothers, along with the deceptive marketing of both sets of parents, was widespread. So this was, most adoption agencies made up untruths about the biological parents to make the babies more attractive.
It wasn't just Louise Wise. It was, they've done some pretty crazy, the worst of the worst, but all the agencies were doing this.
Mm-hmm.
This is countrywide. There was a part that struck me, that this guy they brought on, what was his name? The main doctor starts with a K. Oh, Karolitz.
Oh yeah.
He was a sick ticket. He literally was downright nasty, is how staff would describe him. Mm-hmm. And he was the master of social experimentation on babies. And they literally were like, where would we get babies? Oh, I want to do these experiments. Where would we get babies to experiment on? Oh, in the adoption process, we can keep them longer and experiment on them, and then hold fees against the adopted parents. One father said, oh, you can have a baby, but we get to experiment on them first. Literally said that in something he was interviewed. And this is just, it makes me like, I wanted to throw up almost reading it. I had to put it down a couple times.
They were hurting the feet to see. So he thought that he could measure their intelligence by how they cried, measure their IQ by how they cried when he would.
10 minutes old too.
10 minutes old. Some as young as 10 minutes old, when he would hurt their feet.
Yeah. Snap rubber bands on their feet. And if they didn't react, scratch.
Fingernails. Yes.
Can you just, I mean, this is like, and they do get into the whole Nazi thing. It's like, I'm sorry, but this is human
experimentation. Yeah. Which is, then of course the Geneva laws, all this stuff. Yes. Well, this was post Geneva laws, but
it was
finally, this was considered obviously later barbaric.
Yes. And can we
but
just
this
say,
was our generation. These are babies this could have happened to us, just depending on where we were. Had I been born in New York as opposed to St. Louis, perhaps these things could have happened to me.
And they kept them for several months doing experimentation. Mm-hmm. Did you have a little shout out here? I thought it was interesting that Joyce Brothers backed this up.
Oh, I know.
So Joyce Brothers, for those who don't know, is like this big, she'd come on TV all the time, very soft voice, and talk about healthy things for kids. When I was growing up, I kind of thought she was this nice woman or something.
She'd be on like Phil Donahue.
Yeah. Phil Donahue. She totally backed this stuff.
Oh, I couldn't believe that.
I was surprised by that. This, it was put into the American Medical Association and the Journal of Pediatrics as induced crying. I mean, gross. There was a British man who came along and actually was like, this isn't good for children. And he kind of upset the apple cart, because his own experience in his childhood of being, not with his mother. And so he's later then was like, started to connect the dots that it's important for an infant to be with either, if not their biological mother, ideally, but with a caregiver right away. Consistency.
Right away. A consistent caregiver. And then of course all the adoption agencies were like, whoa, this is problematic for us,
He's the first one who came up with attachment theory.
Yes.
It's like, and that really, it did upset the apple cart, and people started to complain. I think one thing I realized about this, we live in an era now of news, and even when we were a little bit older, maybe not pre-internet, you could get a story right away. Back then it was all to find out what the Louise Wise agency was doing. If you're not involved in it, if you're not some parent waiting and seeing what's going on, it was all through journals of like you and where no one's reading that.
Right.
So it was very easy for them to conduct all these experiments and do all these things without anybody to say anything other. Because who's paying attention? This is $1 million industry back in the day, 1.3 million or something to our terms, like for each, for all these experiments, they get grants for it.
I mean, just beyond. Then there was another great guy that came along, the eugenics guy.
Yeah. Oh, that guy. Yeah. Talk about that.
Who, because the biracial adoption, transracial adoptions, marriage, interracial marriage was outlawed until the Loving case in 1964, I think.
Yep.
67.
Another great movie to watch.
And so somehow the Louise Wise agency ultimately got around the laws of that. But for a long time they were lying about race, but he would do all these bizarre experiments to claim that he knew what they were going to look like. I mean, it's just it's
Crazyville. And there was a quote in there about the Nazis, actually.
Right. Well, his social workers lined up babies in their strollers outside his pain doors, waiting for his evaluation. Shapiro, who was Jewish, made his rulings by judging skulls, nail beds, and birthmarks known as Mongolian spots that are more common among babies of African and Asian descent. The Nazis, of course, employed the same sort of race biology rooted in the eugenics movement of the late 19th century to identify Jews.
Yeah, what a strange thing, because it's a Jewish agency. The whole thing is freaky to me. And I've never told you this, but I had a really big birthmark when I was born on my leg, like really big for the size of being a young girl. And I had it removed when I was like in 8th grade because I was socially conscious about it and like made my mom take me to take it off. It's interesting because I would have been deemed unacceptable because of that. It was like, it would have been like, oh, who did my mom sleep with? You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's just, and then those kids, by the way, if they were deemed too dark, they just got to
they could be in foster care their entire life.
Yeah, just
entire life.
And those foster care agencies back then, that's a hell of its own, even now.
I mean, it's not better it's not any better. There's so many still being like, you're hearing stories constantly of anyway. The one thing that I just highlight little sentences that popped out, and not meaning to be out of context, but just little things. Her research explored many aspects of adoption, from the psychology of unwed mothers to how adopting a child might help heal an infertile couple's grief.
Yeah.
There it is in a nutshell, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
The Band-Aid for the grief.
Yeah. And meanwhile, we'll extort money from them and make them suffer longer.
Right. And then this is where, this whole latter part of the chapter gets into the Bernard Neubauer horrific, illegal, and those about the triplets,
twins and the
like, well, let's see, is it nature versus nurture? Let's separate twins. Let's not tell anybody that we're doing them, and study them over the course of their lives. The triplets, there was 15 years after the triplets, we're talking about from 3 identical strangers, reunited, Eddie Gallen took his own life. Like his brothers, he had long struggled with profound depression. Other twins from the study also displayed worrisome behavior when they were children. Their adoptive parents reported that they banged their heads, were unable to soothe themselves, and held their breath until they passed out. Most describe a lifelong sadness. In addition to Gallen, 2 other twins have killed themselves.
Yeah.
And those records are sealed until 2065.
That's what I was going to say. Most of the people in the experiment still don't know they were in the experiment.
Yeah.
They're just going through their life suffering, wondering. And maybe now with the one thing we have in this world that you can get around this is the DNA sites.
DNA site. Yeah.
But you have to do it. And so it's so troubling. They also got into what we read about with Megan Colhane Galbraith's book, where we discussed it at length, but
The Demicon babies.
yeah,
Yeah.
the
Which,
Demicon
and it wasn't
babies.
just at Cornell, as it
No,
turns
I
out, it
saw
was
that.
all these other places too.
Yeah, I mean, there was all sorts of schools doing this, and outside places.
Like one place had 15,000 mothers for mothers, students for 100 something babies. Can you imagine?
It's like a rotating,
what
chaotic.
I mean, just how do you no secure attachments, to not be able to form one secure attachment in your as a baby?
No,
just sets up a lifetime of grief.
It's really, the whole thing's sad.
They're like just not equitable start of life. That's for darn sure.
No. Well, and finally, baby Stephen he finally gets a family and goes home with him at 10 months old after his real parents have been trying to get him the whole time as a couple. She's now got to be 18.
And they still are,
together.
Planning to try to get custody of him back.
Yeah. And so I'm assuming they eventually probably break up because of this grief, but I have no idea.
We don't know.
Redhead.
Yeah.
But I mean,
that was the other thing. Did you hear about redheads were harder to adopt? Where is that little thing? Redheads, who make up a fraction of the population, were so difficult to place, they were considered children with special needs.
Which, redheads are so beautiful. So it's so crazy to me.
There's just, I can't even with this chapter.
There was one lady, I do have to bring that up now that you said that. Remember the lady, there was a woman in there who couldn't get a baby and was like, they wouldn't give her a baby because of her weird things and her husband. And she's like, well, we should say we want a handicapped baby like you because you have a bad arm or something. Like he had a cut on his arm.
A scar.
He had a scar on his arm. That made him handicapped. I'm like,
yes.
People are so bizarre back then. I mean, even now they're bizarre, but I can't handle.
That was a particularly well, Woody is barking. Sorry, everyone. I don't know what's going on. Well, our guest ties into the Louise Wise agency. This is very, very timely for our guest. Yes.
So we'll see you soon.
See you soon.